Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this information webinar. My name is Chris White. I'm the Operational Director at Brent Council for Environmental Services. So that's a range of frontline services from parks to highways to a number of other activities, including our waste and recycling collections and street cleansing arrangements as well. So I'd like to invite you to this session this evening. This is all about the impact of waste on the climate. We've got some guest speakers here this evening from our partners, Veolia. The intention is that they will provide you with a presentation over the course of the next hour and a half or so. And as part of that, we'll provide a quiz, an interactive quiz for you to participate in. You'll learn all about the impact of waste on climate change. You'll understand what we're trying to achieve here in Brent. You'll get some information on some of the activities around waste and recycling that we're undertaking as a council, and you'll get some good and handy tips on how you can manage your waste in a different way to help our climate ambitions as well. So a real focus on waste and recycling this evening. There'll be a quiz, and then at the end of the session, there'll be a question and answer session where you'll be able to come in and ask any questions to our guest speakers this evening. So that's the format. I'll introduce those speakers in a very short while. We do intend this session to be as interactive as possible. So if you have got any questions throughout the presentation, then please include those in the chat and we can pick those up and we can deal with those when we come to the question and answer session. So hopefully that sets the scene. The first thing that I would like to do is provide an opportunity to the Council's lead member for environment, Councillor Krupa-Sheth, to come in and really describe the Council's commitment to a net zero position around climate change and really set the scene in terms of the Council's overall climate emergency programme, if you like. Councillor Sheth, do you want to come in and describe the Council's commitment?
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Krupa-Sheth. I'm the lead member for the environment at Brent Council, and I oversee Brent's climate emergency strategy. I would firstly like to welcome you all to this webinar and thank you all for joining. Climate change has never been higher on the agenda. Over the last week and a half, the UN International Climate Change Conference, COP26, has seen world leaders coming together from almost every country to agree on how to tackle climate change and secure the future of our planet. COP26 has taken a new level of urgency this year, as it is clear that the world is not moving quickly enough to limit global warming to the 1.5-degree target set in Paris 6 years ago. While COP26 has been dominating national and international headlines, it is here on the local level where we can make real change happen. In 2019, Brent Council declared a climate and ecological emergency and pledged to do all in its gift to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. In April this year, we released a climate and ecological emergency strategy, which sets out a pathway to achieving this goal. Consumption, resources, and waste is the first of the 5 key environmental themes laid out in the strategy and an area that is of huge importance to our residents. This was evident in the recommendations for action made by the Brent Climate Assembly in 2019, which related more to consumption, resources, and waste than to any other theme. In Brent, the emissions caused by waste and resources are estimated to represent over 4 times the carbon emissions which are emitted directly from energy used in housing, buildings, and road transport. In order to reduce these emissions and achieve our net zero target across the borough, this will require a general shift to more sustainable behaviour, not only from Brent Council, but from everyone in our community. In particular, there is a fundamental need for all of us to consume less of the products and materials that damage the environment and to reduce the amount of waste we produce. At Brent Council, we're continuing to work closely with our partners at Veolia to improve our waste collection and recycling processes so that we can limit waste, maximize recycling, and reduce the environmental impacts of our waste. As a local authority, we recognise our important role in leading by example through our own operations, as well as encouraging and enabling our residents to live more sustainably themselves. For many, climate change can seem like a large, complex, and overwhelming topic, and it can be difficult to know how we as individuals can make a difference. Over the last 2 weeks, we have been running the Brent Climate Festival, which has included many different events and activities to make this topic more accessible to residents and businesses. This webinar is one of several webinars we have hosted about the climate emergency this year, and part of our mission to ensure individuals are equipped with better information to understand how they can personally contribute. I would like to thank our partners at Veolia, in particular Oliver and James, for delivering this webinar, which will shed greater light on our waste processes in Brent and provide some tips on how we can all recycle better. If after this webinar you would like to learn more about what Brent is doing to tackle the climate emergency and how you can get involved, please join the Brent Environmental Network by signing up on our website. Thank you again for joining, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Councillor Sheth. Just to say, everyone, the chat room is now open, so the request is being made there for you to use that for any questions that you might have throughout the session, as I suggested earlier. The other intention that I need to make you aware of course, is that we intend to record this session so that we can include the webinar on our website so that it's more accessible to a much wider audience as information. So we intend making a recording, and if you do have any issues with that, please again make that known in the chat, and we'll come back to you with how we can sort of deal with that situation. But the intention is that we record it, we host it on our website, and we make that available to a much wider audience as useful information. I'm going to, without any further ado, bring in James and Oliver from our waste collection and recycling partners, Veolia. James and Oliver will take us through their presentation, and as I suggested, they will host a short quiz after that presentation. James and Oliver, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. That's wonderful. I'll just make sure that I'm unmuted, and James is as well. Right, let me share my screen. If you bear with me a moment, please. And if someone wouldn't mind just confirming that they can see the screen.
Can see that.
You can see that? Perfect. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Chris and Councillor Sheth, for the kind words at the start. And good evening. Welcome, everyone, to this webinar. Be on for about 45 minutes. And then, as Chris says, we'll have a short activity at the end, a bit like a pub quiz for anyone that wants to stay along, and some Q&As afterwards. So, my name is Oliver Peat, and I am the Education, Communications and Outreach Manager here at Veolia in Brent. And I'm joined by my colleague and team leader, James Mason. And today we'll be inviting you to all rethink your waste and hopefully provide you with a bit of background as to what happens to it and some helpful guidance and tips on what you can do at home to really try and kick back at climate change and do something that's within your own grasps, really. This is what we'll be discussing today. I'll give you a quick overview of who we are as Veolia. We'll take you through sort of the bigger picture while you've all tuned in today, and then discuss sustainability and the circular economy very briefly. And then we'll really get into the teeth of this webinar, which is all about how you can take these practical steps to try and fight climate change. We'll also take you through the journey of recycling, what happens after it gets picked up, and then we will finish with the activity at the end. So just very briefly, to kick off, who are Veolia? Well, we've got a motto internally that we are resourcing the world, and that is through our water management, energy management, and waste management. So I'll just throw a few stats out there. In terms of water, we supply 96 million people around the world with drinking water and 62 million people with wastewater systems. When it comes to energy, we have 595 heating and cooling networks that we manage, provides 45 million megawatts per hour of energy that we feed into the national grid. And then in terms of waste, we have collection services for more than 40 million people. And that is on behalf of local authorities around the country, as well as managing nearly 600 treatment plants as well. In London, that translates to us basically partnering with 12 local authorities. You can see Brent there in green. And if you want to be picky and add Watford as well, which we sort of do, that makes it up to 13. We also have 13 facilities that are highlighted in orange just around London as well. And I'll just bring your attention to number 6 and number 7. So number 7 is right bang there in Brent. And this is our Brent transfer station. This is where when we collect all of the recycling from around the borough, we bring it back to the transfer station to get bulked up. And then we will collectively transport that to Southwark, to that dot number 6 right in the middle of your screen, where this is our integrated waste management facility where it will get sorted and separated into its different factions. But I'll come on to that a little bit later. What else do we do? Well, as well as waste collections, we also manage our streets to make sure that they are clean. Very soon, you'll see us out gritting the roads probably in the next couple of months. We also manage our parks and open spaces to make sure that they are clean and tidy. And we've recently we win awards for those every year. We've got a strong education team that myself and James are on, and several others. And there's also a faction that works with Wembley Stadium for their large events, such as during the Euros in the summer. So that's enough about who we are. Now, to talk to you about why we're all here today. And it's this. So you'll all have seen images like this from David Attenborough shows over the past few years. And sadly, scenes like this are seen and lived by the majority of people around the world, even still today, with landfills and tips like this servicing most countries. The waste industry is the 3rd largest producer of greenhouse gases emissions globally, accounting for just under 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The vast majority of that comes from landfills like this, where the waste and food and the green waste will break down and rot in a not very good manner and release methane, which is particularly bad for the environment. So it's just under 5% of greenhouse gases. It might not sound as like much when you compare it to, say, the energy industry, which accounts for, say, about 70% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. However, since practically every sector around the world produces waste, we have a huge potential and actually a huge responsibility to help decarbonize all sectors. So it's not just our own impacts that we have this challenge against, it's other ones as well. I was on another talk last week where there was an argument put to the speaker that the recycling industry, the more that we do, the more that we recycle, surely that will also increase our carbon output. And to a point, they're correct. And in the UK, the recycling industry emits around 15 million tons of CO2 annually. So it's quite a big amount. And you think if you want to increase recycling, then you'll need more facilities and more things, infrastructure in place to do that. But that 15 million tons of carbon is absolutely dwarfed by the carbon embedded in the waste itself. So while we might emit that 15 million tons of carbon, it actually saves 50 million tons of carbon from getting into the atmosphere if we make sure that we are recycling it properly. So there's a real benefit to managing our waste sustainably so it doesn't end up in these sorts of areas. So the key is now to target the most important materials and to take action against them. So what I like to do is just throw up a map and ask a question: which countries you think are the top 3 that produce the most emissions? And you probably won't be surprised in thinking that China is up there, and you'll be right, 14 gigatons of carbon every year. And then if I asked you who the second place was, you'd probably guess right. It's the USA with 6.6 gigatons. And if I asked you who the third one is, it's actually this little country here, which is actually not a country at all. This is actually food waste. And the point here being that if food waste was actually a country, it would emit the third highest amount of carbon emissions in the world behind China and the USA. And that is absolutely astounding, because these are the things that we really, really want to try and challenge now. And that is why we want to try and manage our waste as sustainably as possible. And if we just take that to a UK context, we have over 6 million tons food waste every year that we throw away, of which 4.5 million tons is edible food waste that's perfectly good to eat. To make it even more relevant to Brent, where we've got Wembley Stadium here, it's enough to fill up Wembley Stadium, not just once, but 9 times over, and that's every year. So it's a massive issue, and it's a massive problem that we're trying to resolve. So what is the UK trying to do to resolve it? Well, I'll just give you a bit of an overview. A few years ago, the waste strategy and waste and resources strategy for England came out with a mission to maximize the value of the resources we use and minimize our impact on the environment. And this gets translated into 5 key aims, which are to work towards all plastic packaging placed on the market being recyclable, reusable, or compostable by 2025, to work towards eliminating food waste to landfill by 2030, to eliminate avoidable plastic waste over the lifetime of the 25-year plan, to double resource productivity by 2050, and to eliminate avoidable waste of all kinds by 2050. What does this mean for you? Well, essentially, one of the key things it will mean is that it will be much easier in the near future to recycle all of your plastics at home, which will be beneficial for everyone. And we also will see that there's going to be greater driving forces for the reuse of items and the sharing economy. So you've probably seen just in time for Christmas, the SodaStream adverts that have just come out. It's like the bottles that you can see at the top where Pepsi are now going to a more reusable model. In the middle of the screen is an image taken at one of our partners at West London Waste Authority, where they ran a clothes swap. So we think that the reuse and sharing of clothes is going to be more prevalent because there's a big, large environmental concerns around the clothes industry. And even when it comes to cars, we know that the offices at Brent Council, for example, are being a good leader for this, where they've introduced zip cars for their staff. And we think that there's going to be more car sharing opportunities in the future to try and get people to refrain from getting their own car in the future. And then finally, we know that environmental crime is a big burden on the economy. It costs about £600 million for the UK to deal with every single year. So there will be greater challenges that are trying to get resolved by the strategy there. Again, we've got 3 key policies that are going to be coming out in the next few years, which I just wanted to give you a very quick overview now. But just to put a quick disclaimer on this, I can't give you loads of information because we really don't know how these are going to be translated into regulations and to local authority just yet, because a lot of these are still in consultation. And in the case of extended producer responsibility, we have got a little bit more information, but it's still being battered around by Parliament at the moment. We think that more of this information will be released next year or possibly the year after. So that information will be shared with you in due course. But extended producer responsibility, well, what is this? The cost of disposing or recycling household items will essentially be covered more by the brands that produce the items in the first place and less on the householders that have to pick up the bill at the end. It's done a little bit at the moment through a scheme called the Packaging Recovery Notes, where about 7,000 businesses pay annually a sum of around £150 million to do this, to subsidise local authority treatment. But under the new scheme, this will be reduced to about 3,500 of the biggest brands out there. And instead of £150 million, it'll be £2.7 billion per year paid towards it. So it will be a much bigger aid towards what we're trying to achieve at a national scale. Then we're looking at consistency of recycling, which includes making a transition towards aligning all brands to and local authorities to accept the same types of waste and recycling around the country. And then just to mop up at the end, I believe we're moving towards something called a deposit return scheme, where a monetary value will be placed on each item or certain items when you buy them, such as cans or plastic bottles. And then if you return them to certain recycling points, you will get some of that reimbursed to you. And we believe that this is going to be a strategy to try and help just pull away at those last bits of litter that may end up on the streets. So the smart businesses are already participating in these policies, and you might have seen brands like Coca-Cola that are changing their branding strategy, and eCover, all about making their items, their products more recyclable. So we believe that that's going to be sort of more the case moving forwards. And now just a quick overview about sustainability and the circular economy. I mean, sustainability is a term that you will have heard battered around a lot, especially now in the middle of COP26. What does it actually mean? I mean, the definition is, quite frankly, meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But it goes a little bit further than that. It's got 3 key pillars. It needs to, for anything to be truly sustainable, they've got to make sure that it is socially responsible, economically viable, and environmentally beneficial. And if it's missing just any one of these pillars, then it can't truly be counted as sustainable. So that's what we mean when we're trying to move forward with you know, the next steps on what we want to do locally and across the country. And I guess a final question here before we move on to the next section is, what kind of world do you want to live in? At the moment, you might be seeing that we're living in more of a linear economy. This is where we take resources out of the ground, we manufacture them, distribute them to consumers who would use them, and then throw them in a bin. And then that would be the end of it. And we've got to dig up more raw materials and go through the whole process again. If we keep on going down this route, as we have done for the past few hundred years, then we will, quite frankly, just run out of resources. So what we're looking now is to work towards a circular economy. And this is where, once those raw materials are taken out of the ground and they enter the system, at the end of consumption or use, we then recollect them for recycling or reuse or repurposing or fixing or whatever it might be, so that they are maintained within the system to reduce the amount and the needs for raw materials there as well. So we really, really want to be working together collectively to try and get to this aim. And if we can do that, then reports published by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who are really championing the circular economy work here, will state that this circular economy model could give us trillions of pounds through all the different industries link-ups that it will have. So where can we start? And in the next section, we're breaking it down in sort of real and simple terms for you, how you can help. But for some of you, this might seem fairly basic, and we're going to be really breaking it down to the basics for everyone. But they're all really vital and quite easy steps that we can and really should be taking right now in order for us to help tackle the climate emergency that we're in. So I'll now hand over to James.
Thank you, Ollie. Yes, where do we start? It is a huge question. With all the big picture talk about systems and systemic change and policy, government speaking at COP26 at the moment, Brent Council taking incredible steps forward, it can be quite difficult to know where to begin. But we find the best thing to do is to start with your own actions as an individual. So if we take the circular economy that Ollie just outlined as the guiding theory, then what you see here is the waste hierarchy, and this is how we can put that theory into practice. So that graphic there is the waste hierarchy, and that ranks the steps that we can take to reduce our waste and to lessen our impact on the environment as well. So from the top down, I'll rank the actions to take according to what's best for the environment, and down to what is the last resort on the waste hierarchy here. So this practice is applicable to both our individual actions, so what we do in our day-to-day lives and the decisions that we make as individuals, but it's also applicable to the system as a whole. We at Veolia, worldwide, nationally, and in Brent, this is our guiding theory that we try to follow, but also organizations, governments, and corporations. It is really an all-encompassing guiding practice. And what we'll do is take you through each of the stages in the waste hierarchy now. So the first stage in the waste hierarchy, and the most important stage, is to reduce. So reducing is cutting down what we use, it's cutting down what we consume, it's creating less waste. And this is the most effective way to reduce our impact on the environment. So reducing waste saves energy, as producing the new materials and processing the waste requires raw, or what we call virgin resources, such as oil or such as water. So by reducing this, we're cutting down the carbon emissions, as the extraction and the use of these raw materials is an incredibly carbon and energy intensive process. So by reducing in our day-to-day lives, we're cutting down on the amount of energy that we use as individuals. So reducing involves thinking about the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. So this can include what we buy or what we use, or how that might be packaged, and how we get rid of these items. So how we might get rid of old clothing, for example. So what are the ways that we can reduce? Now, these might seem, as Ollie mentioned, somewhat elementary. However, as well as being practical tips that we'll take you through, they're all about ways to get you to start thinking about the actions that you take towards a more sustainable behavior. So we're looking at starting small and growing our impact, or our lack of impact, I should probably say. So the first one here, very simple, cut down on your plastic consumption. And one of the ways we can do that is take reusable bags to the shops with you. Reusable bags, reusable plastic bags have cut down massively in the UK over the last few years, and a part of that will be the cost of them now. However, a big part of that is also education around the matter, and people understanding how such a simple action can make a really, really huge difference. The second that we would suggest is, if possible, and if you can do at home, use your garden and kitchen waste to make your own compost. Again, we're cutting down our waste. Everyone creates quite a reasonable amount of garden and kitchen waste, or at least kitchen waste. So if we can cut down and reduce our waste by making our own compost if possible, then that's a great way to do so. Something else to look at in terms of our day-to-day actions, if you're out at the shop, look at reducing the packaging that we buy our products in. So fruit and veg, often wrapped in plastic very unnecessarily. If I'm buying a bag of carrots, often there is a bag wrapped in plastic, but right next to it, you'll usually find loose carrots. So it's really small actions like this where we can start to cut down our own consumption and reduce our own consumption and reduce our own waste, where we can start here and start to grow the impact that we have. And then finally, we can look at donating our own old clothes to a charity shop and using charity shops ourselves. These are not things where you have to change and turn your life upside down. These are things that you can start to slowly integrate into your life and almost not even notice the difference you're making, whilst at the same time making a huge difference. So the second stage in the hierarchy is reuse. Simply put, it is what it says on the tin. This is reusing whatever we can, whenever we can. So it might be reusing a water bottle, or repurposing an item into something new, using it in a different way, possibly repairing your electrical items instead of buying a brand new replacement. Nowadays, it's far too easy to just jump on Amazon or wherever it is and replace whatever broken item you have. It's looking into reusing those items to reduce the waste that we're producing. The important element here of reuse is moving away from single-use products or brand new products where this is possible. And this is where we begin to see how the connections between the levels within the hierarchy come together. So by reducing single-use plastic bottles or single-use cutlery and opting for a reusable alternative, we're able to hit both levels of the hierarchy at once, which is exactly what we're trying to do. So some simple examples of reusing is to repair clothes and holes, repair holes and rips in your clothes. This is something that seems to have gone out of fashion, excuse the term, in recent years, but it's something that we should really look to bring back, especially now the fast fashion industry as an emitter, and its impact on the environment is massive and is only growing. So if we can do what we can to reduce our consumption in that sense and reuse our clothes, then that's a great way to start. Then secondly, reusable water bottle. I think this is something that hopefully we're all doing now. This is probably the most common one that you might see. Again, incredibly simple, incredibly effective way to reduce our waste by reusing. The number of water bottles that we go through as a planet and as a UK alone is staggering. And if we can do what we can to cut down on that, then we're doing a really good thing there. Another way we can is to donate our furniture to a charity shop or upcycle our furniture. Again, another very energy intensive process is producing materials and producing furniture. So that's a great way that we can cut down. And then finally, looking back at the fashion industry, looking at clothes swaps with family, with friends, again, using the secondhand shops, using charity shops, a very simple way to cut down on our waste. So if we haven't been able to cut down on a certain item, if we haven't been able to reuse it, the next best thing that we would be able to, that we'd want to do is to recycle it, if it is a recyclable material, and we will come to that in a little bit. So recycling, I'm sure you'll all know, is a process of turning used materials and waste into something new so that the materials can be used again. It's converting something that would otherwise be wasted into a resource. So instead of throwing away that drink can, recycle it, and we can turn it into another can. Very simple, but incredibly important and incredibly effective as well. So we'll take you through in a little bit the recycling journey, but there's a little peek into the journey there. So again, looking back at the closed loop and the circular economy, and that's what recycling looks to do, and that's what we try to put in place as Veolia when we try to recycle. So just to keep you on your toes a little bit, we've got a little question here. So what is the average number of times that metal and glass can be recycled? You should have a poll come up now in front of you. And if you can vote for A, infinite amount of times, B, 20 times, or C, 40 times. Give you a little bit of time there.
I can't see the answers to these, so you'll have to let me know when.
I will do.
These.
So they're coming in quite quickly. We're dominated by infinite amount of times in terms of the answers, a few 20 times, a few 40. But the answer is A, infinite amount of times. So glass and metal are fantastic items to recycle. We can continuously recycle them without them losing any quality, and they can stay within that closed loop system, within that circular economy. So they're great items to recycle, and we want to make sure we always are. On that, what can I recycle? Again, as Ollie mentioned, some of this might seem a little bit elementary to you if you do know, but this is one of the questions that we get asked one of the most as an eco team. What exactly is it that we can recycle? Now, for us, it is very simple, but you just have to get an understanding of what it is and exactly the materials you can and can't recycle. So I'll very quickly take you through the main materials, and this is what we accept in Brent. So the first one is mixed glass bottles and jars, any jam jars, anything like that. Perfect, throw them in there. Food tins, drink cans, and aerosols. So those kinds of metals are accepted as well. So we will take those. Clean paper and cardboard. Emphasis here on clean paper and cardboard. So if you have a pizza box, for example, if you had a pizza, might have made the bottom part of the cardboard a little bit oily. Unfortunately, the oil renders that part of the cardboard unrecyclable. However, what I would do, tear it in half, send the bottom bit, the oily bit, put that with the general waste, and the top bit is usually good to go, so we can put that in our recycling there. All plastic bottles. Plastic bottles can go in anything from a bottle of Coke to your shampoo bottles or cleaning products, anything like that. That's great to be recycled. Food and drink cartons, so orange juice cartons, anything like that. And plastic containers and food trays as well. Something to remember is we want to be rinsing these out before we put them in. no need to throw them in the dishwasher or anything. Just give them a quick rinse so that there's no residue on there. We'll go into a little bit more detail about why that is important, but that's something to remember. If you do have an item that you're unsure of, you can always check Brent's website or check Brent's Recyclopedia, which is a fantastic resource. Just type in Brent Recyclopedia into Google. It will be the first one that comes up. And you can type in any material that you do have if you're unsure about it, and it will come up and show you exactly what bin to put it in Brent. So that's a great resource that I would direct you to. So knowing your plastics, this is another question we get asked a lot. There are so many different types of plastics causing a lot of confusion. There's different numbers, there's different makeups, they feel different. So these here are all the plastics that we accept in Brent. So milk cartons, plastic tubs, pots and trays, clear and colored plastic bottles, all your bathroom products really, plastic spray and cleaners, hand soaps, bleach, shampoo, and shower gel bottles. You kind of get the idea of the types of plastics that we do accept. Ollie's going to go into a little bit of detail about the types that we don't accept, but hopefully this will give you a bit of a clearer indication. But as we say, pop onto Recyclopedia and you can type in the specific product or a specific item that you have, and it will give you all that information as well.
Thanks, James. So as good as everyone might be at recycling, I think we're all slightly guilty of this, and I'm sure this is quite sort of poignant to a lot of people, where we might just put something in the recycling bin and hope for the best. We don't have a degree in recycling, most people. Unfortunately, I do. But we call this something that we're all guilty of, and that is wish cycling. So this is something that we put in the recycling bin that and hope that it'll be recycled. Unfortunately, it won't. This is actually a really, really big problem for us, because this means that items that shouldn't be put in that bin will contaminate the load of recycling and make it basically unrecyclable at all, in some cases, in the worst cases. And that can be really detrimental to the recycling process. We always kind of use a term which is, if in doubt, leave it out. And that's because it's very, very expensive to try and remove these bad items from the recycling stream once it's already integrated. And it can, as I say, it can mean that the whole load can be rejected for waste. So for example, if I take a baked bean tin and it hasn't been rinsed out properly and it's still half full, when that goes into the back of the lorry and the lorry compresses, those beans can spill over it. All the goods, paper and card and other things that all the other people on the street have done well, and it can mean that that part of the recycling may get rejected. And if there's enough of that happening, then you can see that the problem really compounds itself and makes it really, really bad. That's why we always want people to have the best intentions, but make sure that they're recycling properly. This is the top 6 items that we see on a daily basis where people think can be recycled, but absolutely can't be put into your blue top bin. So starting from top left is food wrappers and packets. James showed you all the types of plastics that we can accept. So it's basically pot stubs and trays and all bottles, but scrunchy plastics or cling film, any bags, any crisp packets, anything like that, unfortunately, that cannot be recycled. The same goes with nappies, tissues, and sanitary items. I know that that should sound pretty obvious to most people, but unbelievably, we see nappies all the time ending up in our recycling bins. And these cause us massive problems down the road. Polystyrene, a lot of people again think that is recyclable, but unfortunately not at the curbsides. And black bin bags. The only place that a black bin bag should go is your black bin. These cannot be recycled. Even if all the stuff on the inside is recyclable, unfortunately the bag itself won't be. And when that ends up at our recycling facility, it will just be assumed that that is general waste and it will get rejected. Food waste, that can range anything from people putting whole items of food in their recycling bin to maybe just the odd bit that they haven't rinsed off, but that can cause us big problems when it gets compacted in the vehicle over the other materials. And then clothing and shoes, again, something that we see a lot of in recycling stream. A lot of people think that it can be recycled, therefore it should be put in the recycling bin. You're right, it can be recycled, but not in your blue bin. So where do all these go? Well, for the first 4, it's quite simple and straightforward. Pop it in your general waste bin. For food wrappers, packets, nappies, tissue, sanitary items, polystyrene, black bin bags, all go in there. Food waste can go into your food bin. So if you live in a house, you've got a food caddy that you can use. And if you're living in a flat, you should have access to a communal food waste bin. And if you don't have that, then please get in touch with us and we can arrange for that to happen. And then with clothes and shoes, you can either donate them to a charity shop, or you will see these trade bins dotted around the borough. So please make sure that you pop them inside, or as an alternative, you can actually leave them by the side of your bin if you've got one and you're living in a house, and we will collect them the next working day after your recycling collection. So another quick quiz just to keep you on your toes. So I believe a poll will come up shortly. Can you tell me which symbol found on packaging lets you know the item, excuse me, the item that can most likely be recycled in the UK? Again, James, you're gonna have to tell me once we've got a reason.
No worries, we're just waiting for some answers to come in.
Very commonly found signs that you might see on your products.
Interesting answers so far. We've got 14 in and 100% of the answers are for C. And we've got 1 answer now for A.
Okay.
Yeah, I reckon, yeah, we can probably leave it there, Ollie. We've got 94% answered C and 6%, so 1 person answered A. Nobody answered B.
Okay. Interesting. All right, well, let's run through the answers. Correct answer was B. B is the sign for recycling on packaging in the UK. Let's just take you through each one. A is called the green dot. And a lot of people get this confused. It's a symbol used on packaging in some European countries, and it signifies that the producer has made a financial contribution towards recycling or recovery of packaging in the EU. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the UK at all. The products that you'll see that on will most likely be used in the UK and in Europe, so that's why you'll be seeing them. But for us, it is not a sign of recyclability. With C, this is sort of the most commonly found logo for recycling. It's called the Mobius loop. And it kind of indicates that an object is capable of being recycled, but not that the object is being or will be accepted as recycling in your local authority collection systems. And sometimes they'll have a percentage or a little number in the middle, which kind of signifies what type of plastic it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's recyclable at your curbside. The label that we should be looking out for is the one in the middle, which shows that it is recyclable in the UK. And if you see a sign, if you see a item with this on it, then 9 times out of 10, we will be able to recycle it in Brent.
Yeah, really interesting results there. So what we're going to do, once we've put the recycling into our recycling bins, gets taken away by Veolia when we're in Brent, but where does that go? So we've got a quick video here to take you through the recycling journey for our recycling in Brent. All right, so there is, in a nutshell, the recycling journey for the recycling that we collect in Brent when we send it down to the recovery facility. I'm going to take you through that very quickly. As we've just watched the video, we don't need to repeat everything again, but the recycling is collected from your home and taken to the materials recovery facility in Southwark, the one that Ollie mentioned at the very start, where it's picked up and put onto a conveyor belt. And the first stage of sorting is large rotating discs using gravity to separate by size. So that's where we start to sort out the large cardboard and the cardboard boxes and whatnot that you might put into your recycling bin. The recycling is then checked by people. So it's checked by our colleagues. You will have seen in the video, there's lines of people checking through the recycling. And this takes me back to something that I mentioned earlier about rinsing out your recycling. So this is one of, not the only, but one of the big reasons that we encourage people to rinse out that recycling. If we're putting, you know, a lot of food residue in the recycling and 2 weeks later, possibly it's then being checked by some of our colleagues there, it doesn't make it a very pleasant job to do. So just a simple washout so that our teams can sort it and it's more pleasant for them. So glass bottles and jars then fall through a vibrating sieve, which breaks them into smaller pieces, which are easier to manage. And a large magnet separates the steel cans. An eddy current machine separates the aluminium cans from the rest of the recycling, and then the optical sorting machine uses lasers and air jets to separate plastics. This is all incredible technology. I've been down to the recovery facility in Southwark a dozen times now, and every time I go there, it doesn't fail to blow me away. It's really fantastic what gets done down there. And once all the recycling is sorted, it's baled up, stacked, and is sent to be recycled and sent to be processed. So that's the journey of our dry mix recycling in Brent. So our dry mix recycling is our, you know, our plastics and paper and whatnot. But just quickly to go through the food waste journey in Brent. So food waste is collected by a biocollector from our transfer station in Wembley, which is then delivered to a specialist facility in Mitcham, where we begin the recycling process. So at the facility, we operate a closed loop solution. And this converts every single bit of food waste that we collect. So every single bit of food waste that's collected from Brent is turned into either electricity, biogas or heat, or fertilizer, which is used by local farmers. And it's all done via an anaerobic digestion process. So as I mentioned, the closed loop system means that every single last bit of food waste collected gets turned into one of these energies. Absolutely nothing is wasted. When we look at garden waste, much simpler process. It's collected and sent to a composting facility where it is turned into compost and is turned into Veolia's ProGrow compost, which is available to buy for anyone. We make it available to anyone. Now moving on to the general waste journey. With the hierarchy, the waste hierarchy, we mentioned reduce, reuse, and recycle. This is where the recovery stage comes into play. So it's energy recovery from non-recyclable waste. So this is the most environmentally friendly way to deal with general waste, and it is an energy recovery through incineration. And this is what we do with all of Brent's general waste. So from this, flue gas emissions go through a rigorous treatment process where the majority of the gas released is turned into water vapor, and there are small amounts of CO2. However, this is a minuscule amount when we compare it to that comes from landfill, which is the other option. So rather than sending our waste to landfill, which in Brent, we're incredibly proud to say that we don't, we take our general waste to an energy recovery facility where it's incinerated and turned into energy. That energy is used to power to create electricity, to power homes, to power buildings, to power businesses. Anything that's left over is turned into ash, which is used in construction and used on roads. And this is by far the safest and the most climate-friendly way to treat any waste that can't be recycled. So that's what we do with the general waste in Brent. So just to see who may have been paying attention, may have been listening, who may not have been, quick question here. Which of the following items cannot be recycled? Cannot be recycled. Is it A, aerosol cans, colored glass bottles, or is it plastic bags and film? All right, I'm seeing these answers already, and that's great to see. We are 100% out of 20 of us have voted for plastic bags and film. One person has voted for colored glass bottles. Yeah, I think we can leave it there. Answers came in really quickly for that one, which is great to see. Yes, it's plastic bags and film. As Ollie mentioned, anything like that, salad bags, plastic bags, cling film, the tops of any pots that you might get. So if it's a microwave meal or anything like that, unfortunately, anything that's a thin, soft plastic like that can't be recycled. Aerosol cans are fantastic. Any glass bottles are great as well. All right, so what else can we do? You know, we've taken you through a few different things you can do, the smaller actions that you can take. And that is the number one thing that I will say, is to follow the waste hierarchy. It's about making the active decisions in our everyday life. These changes and these actions, they might seem small, they might seem really simple, but the impacts are real and the impacts are large when we make these as an individual, but we come together as a community and as a country. The impact that we can make with these small changes are huge. Another thing we can do is to speak to people about the issue. It's really, really important that we do that. Anything you might have learned today or anything you might read, talk to your friends and your family about what the issue is. If you want to take things further, if you want to take things to the next step, we can help, and we would love to help. We have Veolia Sustainability Fund, so this is open to any individuals, community groups, businesses or schools in Brent to help get your environmental project up and running, or to take it to the next level if it's already started. So with our funding, we look to support anyone trying to take action. And these are some of the individuals and the groups that we've helped in Brent, and we would love to help you, whether it's just you or it's a group that you're part of. So we supported Harlesden Neighbourhood Forum a few months ago, funded their event where they held litter picking with families and educational sessions. We helped Energy Garden. If anyone uses Brondesbury Park Station, or there are a number of other stations across London, we help them in the Brondesbury Park Station, where they've got a community garden at the side of the platform, where they carry out educational sessions and they grow herbs and vegetables that the public can take and anyone can. And after COVID, we help them get back on their feet there. Litter picking groups are in abundance in the borough, which is fantastic to see. We've got Josh there on the bottom right. Over the lockdown last year, he got in touch with us through our sustainability fund and said, look, I'm seeing lots of waste building up in our parks and open spaces. I want to do something about it. So we gave him litter picking equipment, and we've cleared the waste for him every week. And he goes out, and for the last year, he's gone out every single week to clear and to do litter picking, and it's been recognized. We submitted him in for the Brent Young Environmentalist of the Year award this year, and he won it from his fantastic work that he's been doing over the last year. And we're so proud and privileged to be able to work alongside such an inspiring character and to have been able to facilitate him in the amazing work that he does. We have also got From Brent to Bowl, which we just launched this week. I think there was a link put into the chat. So if you want to scroll up in the chat, you might be able to see a link to this. But From Brent to Bowl is a sustainable community cookbook that we put together to bring together the community and celebrate the cultural and culinary diversity that we have in the borough, but also with a focus on providing education on sustainable eating and sustainable food systems. And this is another way that the community could get involved, as all the recipes were submitted by our Brent residents. The fantastic recipes were submitted by residents who won the competition. And we also had a recipe submitted by Nadia Hussein, who won the Bake Off. So that's free to access for any residents on the Brent Council website. So what we did try to promote with the cookbook, and what we try to promote, and as Ollie has mentioned, is sustainable eating. So our food systems are so key to our impact on the climate, and what we consume and the way that we consume our food can have a massive, massive impact, as these larger systems are massively reliant on the choices that we make as individuals. So our actions might in their own way and on their own seem small, but everything contributes, and everything contributes to taking that step towards solving the climate emergency. So some very, very simple steps that you can take to make your eating habits more sustainable. First one is to meal plan. So planning your meals is a great way to reduce the waste that you produce. This helps you buy only what you need, also saves you money, and you use all of that food if you have meal planned properly. No more finding that old bag of spinach down at the bottom of the fridge that's wet and you can't remember when you bought it. That's not nice at all for a number of reasons. Another one, loving your leftovers. Really simple. If you're like me, you cook up a dinner and you make far too much, loads of leftovers. That's fantastic. Have them for lunch the next day, have them for dinner, freeze them. It's just being aware and making the active decision to use those leftovers. Don't let them go to waste. Another thing that you can do is reduce your meat intake. So this is not going vegetarian or vegan necessarily. Not everyone has to do that. You can start by cutting down your meat intake. Go meat-free once a week, because that can have a huge impact on the environment. The meat industry is incredibly carbon intensive. It's also land intensive and water intensive. And it's a great way to reduce your impact, is reduce your meat. Nothing you can do is buy local and eat in season. Air and shipping miles have a huge amount of carbon emissions, and they add so much to the food that we eat. So by eating local, you're not only cutting down on these emissions massively, but you're supporting local business. And in this current climate, that's a really great thing to be doing. And finally, simple one, I like this one, wonky veg. So is it the wrong size? Is it the wrong shape? Does it look a bit funny? These are the most wasted fruits and veg from our shops. I personally go straight for these because I know that they're going to be wasted. So something you can do, save them from going to waste by choosing them first. I promise you, they taste exactly the same. And you know what? It'll make dinner time a little bit more interesting. So why not go for that? We also run schools programs. So we have Veolia Sustainable Schools, which is a national schools program, but we also run it in Brent. So it's based around helping the young generations of tomorrow understand why it's important to reduce, reuse, and recycle, and why these sustainable behaviors are vital in our fight against climate change. So if you have any children who go to Brent schools, if you work at a school, if you have an affiliation with a school at all, please get in touch with us, as we offer these educational activities, workshops, assemblies. They're all free, and we want to be engaging with students as much as possible, as that's one of the most important things that we do, myself and Ollie do, as part of the Eco team in Brent.
Thanks, James. So just to round this off, I just wanted to mention a couple of initiatives that we do actively as Veolia in Brent. Last year, we became the first area in the UK to trial using a fleet of gritters, gritting vehicles with fully electric salt spreaders mounted to the back of them. And this year, when it gets a little bit colder, you will likely see these bright orange things driving around the borough. And you can rest assured that they are much cleaner and greener than those in neighbouring authorities. It means that the energy and the fuel that's being used to power the vehicle is not being used to spread the grit, and it really reduces the amount of latent energy that might be used when it's stopping at lights and things like that. We unfortunately do get litter in the borough, as we do everywhere in London, really. But something that we've started doing from last year is recycling the coffee cups that we pick up. So I believe last year we picked up around and recycled around 3,500 coffee cups in the last few months. And we collect them separately on our barrows and send them off to a facility to make sure that they get recycled. So that's something that we're trying to implement now borough-wide for any other littered coffee cups. And then, since we are kind of in this season at the moment, leaves are falling down. You'll see that our crews are out there at the moment. They're working incredibly hard to try and catch up with the leaves as soon as they fall to pick them back up. We, every year, collect around 200 tons of leaves, and we make sure that these are diverted from the waste stream and instead sent for composting instead. So we make sure that nothing is wasted here. So in summary, we would recommend that everyone therefore follows the waste hierarchy wherever they possibly can. in their day-to-day lives, to really speak to people about the issue, speak to us, and to really take action locally. So if you feel free to get in touch with us, and if you're interested in any of the initiatives that we've mentioned today, we'd be happy to hear from you. But also speak to your neighbours, speak to any local action groups that might be in your area to learn how you might be able to be more hands-on. We've got plenty of Friends of Parks groups in the borough that would be happy to speak with you as well. And then finally, try to eat more sustainably, because food waste in Brent is something that we're really, really trying to target over the upcoming years to make sure that food is reused and eaten as much as possible, and anything that's left over that cannot be avoided is recycled properly and sustainably. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking this evening, and we'll now move straight on to our little pub quiz activity. So this seems to have worked okay so far. We've got 10 questions. So without further ado, we'll just sort of dive straight into it. So we'll have a few polls coming up now. So can you tell me, recycling one toilet roll tube saves enough energy to fully charged? Is it A, 1 smartphone, B, 2 smartphones, or C, 5 smartphones? James, I'll need your help again once you see these flying in.
Mixed bag so far. One smartphone seems to be the most common answer. Yeah, I think we can probably leave it there. We've got 62% said 1, 24 said 2, and 14%, only 3 people said 5.
Okay, go on, James, do you want to reveal?
Yeah, the answer is C, 5 smartphones. So you can see there just how much energy can be saved by recycling just such a small item, one toilet roll tube. You think of how little that is, and how small amount of material that is, but how much of an impact that can make. So, you know, I hope we're seeing now the impact that recycling really can have, and the amount of energy that it can save if such a small item can have such a big impact there.
Yeah, we'll come back to a few more questions like that in a moment, but now I just want to go on to a sorted out activity. So tap A if you think it goes in your recycling bin, or B if it goes into your refuse bin. Just get rid of that. For these following items. So first, we've got a greasy pizza box. Does this A go in your recycling bin, or B go into your refuse bin?
All refuse so far. Glad to hear. Good to see that everyone was listening. Yes, that's correct. You want to put that into your general waste bin. However, as I mentioned, if you took that pizza box there, for example, I might rip it in half where it folds over, and recycle the lid because that's clean. And then the bottom bit, maybe we can put that into the general waste. But yeah, for the most part, we want to put that into the general waste bin. That's correct.
Thank you, James. Next one, coffee cups. Something that is in the media a lot. Is it A, something that you put in your curbside recycling bin, or B, something that you'd put in the refuse bin?
Very interesting. All right, I think we can leave it there.
The operative word here is, can it go into your curbside recycling bin?
Yes. So we've got 58% of people said we can put them in our recycling bin. 42% said general waste bin. With coffee cups, they unfortunately, with your curbside or with your recycling from your block of flats, would have to go into your general waste bin. Coffee cups have an inner lining, an inner plastic lining, unfortunately, which renders them unrecyclable at your standard curbside collection. However, there are a number of cafes and coffee shops and around the borough, and through specialist recycling facilities, they can be recycled. So as we mentioned, our streets team do collect coffee cups and send them to a specialist facility. However, as part of your curbside recycling, their curbside collection, they would have to go into your general waste bin. So they have to be sent to specialist recycling facilities.
Thank you, James. Last one for now. Aluminium foil. Is this A, in your recycling bin, or B, in your general waste bin? What do we think about tin foil?
All right, we've got 90% with recycling, and 20% went for general waste. If you said recycling here, you would be correct. Aluminium foil is perfect to be recycled. Scrunch it up into a ball, put it into your recycling bin. But if it has food residue or a large amount of food residue on it, unfortunately, that would render it unrecyclable. But for the most part, aluminium foil is fine to be recycled, yes.
Yeah, just knock off the food crumbs and you'll be fine. Black bags, what do we think? Is it A, go in your recycling bin, or B, in your black bin for refuse? Might have given out a clue there.
All right, 95% into the general waste and 5%, one vote, into the recycling. So as Ollie mentioned earlier, we never want to be putting black bags into our recycling bins. Always put black bags into your black general waste bin.
Yeah, and that's even if they do contain perfectly harmless, good recycling. Unfortunately, we just, once it reaches the facility, we can't rip open every single bag like that, unfortunately, because the volume of waste that we are taking through the actual black bag material can't actually be recycled itself, but it will be presumed that the rest of it inside is unrecyclable. And I believe this is actually the last one before we go back on to general knowledge. So food wrappers and plastic bags, is it A, in your recycling bin, or is it B, in your general waste bin?
We've got 100% of people said to put it into the general waste bin. So that is
Brilliant.
correct. That is correct.
Well done. Right, okay, now back onto some general knowledge. Which of the following items cannot be recycled? Is it A, bleach bottles, B, polystyrene, or C, used glass jars? That's which cannot be recycled. Really, really testing those that are paying attention now.
Yeah, well, it seems like everyone has been, because 100% of answers are for polystyrene, which is great to see. This used to be and still is somewhat a bit of a problem material. A lot of people assume that it is recyclable, kind of in the way that we think about it, in the same way as plastics, perhaps. But I've seen a big change over the last few years of people getting an understanding that polystyrene is unfortunately not recyclable in your curbside collection, and then needs to be put into your general waste.
Thank you. Right, let's move on to the next one. So this one is tick all that applies. So what does your food waste from Brent get turned into? Is it A, heat energy, B, fertilizer, C, electricity? You tick all of the ones that you think it is. Tricky question, this one, I think.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much good. 90% of people said heat, 95 fertilizer, and 81% said electricity. The answer would be all of them. Depending on the time, the food waste from Brent can be turned into any and all, and does get turned into all of these energies: heat energy, fertilizer, and electricity.
Brilliant. Right. Last couple. How many single-use plastic bottles are bought in the UK every day? Is it A, 800,000, B, 10 million, or C, 20 million? I mean, any one of those is pretty massive.
So we have 32% of people voted for 80,000, 29% of people 80,000, 55% of people 100 million, 10 million, excuse me, and 18% of people said 20 million. The answer to that, shockingly, is 20 million plastic bottles are bought in the UK every day, according to the government and water.org. That's every single day. 20 million single-use plastic bottles are bought in the UK. Again, it takes us back to the small changes that we can make. When you look at that, and we look at taking a reusable water bottle with us and cutting down on our single-use plastic consumption, us taking that small individual action can add up to a huge amount, or otherwise us not taking that small individual action can have a huge impact. As you can see there, 20 million plastic bottles every single day in the UK. It's quite shocking.
And you
Really
think
shocking.
that's just the UK as well. When you look at other countries, it starts spiraling. This is the last question. Which of the following cannot be placed into your food waste bin? Now, this one is
Multiple choice.
yeah. Is it A, plastic bags and film, B, oils and fats, or C, meat and fish bones? This one is choose as many that apply.
Yeah, we're looking pretty good. Everyone has said plastic bags and film. I'm very glad to hear that. Very true. No plastic at all can be placed into your food waste bin. The second correct answer would have been oils and fats. Only 30% of people mentioned oils and fats. Unfortunately, oils and fats can't be placed into your food waste bin, and meat and fish bones are completely fine to be put into your food waste bin. So oils and fats and plastic bags and film are the two items there that we can't put into our food waste bin.
Yeah, that's right. And just to set people's mind at ease, if you do want to put your food into something before you put it into your food waste bin, you can either wrap it in a single sheet of newspaper, like one of those free ones that you pick up on the tube, or you can use compostable bags, and you can buy these pretty much anywhere now. Just look out for the little compostable logo, which is a couple of leaves and a ribbon tied around them. So thank you very, very much for attending this evening. Really loved being able to talk to so many people on such an important topic for Brent's Climate Festival. If you want to get more information, then please visit either the Brent websites. You can visit the Veolia websites. And if you ever do want to double check if that item in your house can be recycled, then download the Recyclopedia app, or you can access it on the Brent Council website as well by just searching Brent Recyclopedia, and it will come up. So thank you very much. And I will now hand it back over to Chris.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Oliver and James. That was really insightful, a useful guide to recycling in Brent. One of the things that we need to do now, obviously, is run through some of the questions that were put in the chat whilst you were giving your presentation. There does seem to be a bit of a clear theme around understanding some of the challenges of what can go where and what we need to do with specific materials, if you like. Some of the, the misunderstanding around symbols, but also some wrong answers around which bins need to be used for which materials does suggest we've got a bit of a sort of communications issue to deal with, Oliver and James. One of the things that has come through really is a concern raised by Carmel that, the colour of bins in Brent, very different from what they might be in place in neighbouring boroughs and the like. There doesn't seem to be an overarching national policy around the branding of recycling containers and the like. Is that something that's set to change, do you know?
I think absolutely. I think when right at the start, when I speak about consistency, which is going to be a major policy uptake that's going to be coming out in the future, we will absolutely start to see fewer materials being used for more products. So in terms of plastics, by I believe it's either 2025 or 2026, there's actually a very ambitious target that all plastics that are put out for households items will be made from 100% recyclable materials. And that's part of the Plastics Pact that is now coming out and has got a lot of members working towards it, including Veolia. So although that doesn't sound like a particularly hard or ambitious thing to do, there's a lot of work that goes into making those materials recyclable. And although while most of it can be, we talk about films and things like that, it's actually very difficult to make those particular things recyclable. So there will be more consistency in the types of materials that you see that will be made recyclable. And not only just for those materials, but I think around the UK, there will be more consistency with the types of collections, and you'll start seeing, you won't start seeing different things that can be collected when you go back home to, say, somewhere in the north of the country to back down in London as well. So I think that absolutely that will be something that will be changed in the future.
One of the things that has been raised, Oliver, whilst you were giving your presentation, is the fact that whilst we don't collect film and soft plastics in Brent, you do have that opportunity in neighbouring boroughs such as Westminster. Do you know why those sort of discrepancies might exist from borough to borough, and is there any opportunity for Brent really to start to offer up those similar opportunities around plastic and soft film, if you like?
Well, I can't speak for Westminster. I'm not sure what their facility, what their arrangements are that they've got with their council. I know that there are items that while they are technically recyclable, they can't be, collected at curbsides in Brent. I think that there are opportunities in the future to try and improve the technologies to be able to recycle these more readily and more easily. We did speak about coffee cups, and I'm sort of going on tangent slightly, which are technically recyclable, but they're just very difficult because you've got to separate the different types of material that make up the actual cup itself. And it's the same with all of these sort of harder to reach materials. So I think as the technology gets better and these things start becoming more financially viable to do on a larger scale, the opportunities will be there more for more boroughs, not just in London, but around the country. So it is difficult, but I think there will be more opportunities coming soon to make those more recyclable in your curbsides.
Okay, good stuff. And one of the points that P has raised in the chat is what he considers to be a real concern around the levels of contamination in some of the bins in his street and nearby. Do you want to just very briefly describe the work that you do, Veolia does, and your colleagues do to try and drive down those levels of contamination and get a better message out around what needs to go in which bin so that those problems are reduced? What's the approach in Brent to informing residents about contamination?
No, it's a very good question. I hope that we did sort of stress the importance of putting the right stuff in the right bin, and the scourge of wish cycling as well. When you think you're doing something right, but it's actually not. In Brent, we take it very, very seriously. We have quite a rigorous contamination policy that we've set up along with Brent Council, which is a 5-stage process where people in, we call them street level properties, the ones that have bins themselves, if they put the wrong items in their bin on multiple occasions, then they'll enter the process where crews will report the bin as being contaminated. They will leave the bin. They will put a tag on the bin to educate the residents that there's something in there that can't be collected, and ask them to remove it for the next collection. And if it persists beyond that, then what we do, we have stages where we write letters to residents, send them information, send them leaflets. If it persists beyond that again, then we will do a visit to the property and just speak them through exactly what can and can't go into the bin. And if it goes beyond that, then we will, take even further action where we'll knock on the door again and really try and drill it down to where it needs to be. In serious cases, we may end up removing the recycling bin from that property if there really doesn't seem to be any hope. But we really try and make sure that we don't get to that stage. And we've got 83,000 curbside properties in Brent, where we've been working this policy now for the past 3-4 years, and it's been working very, very well at bringing down the number of people that just aren't really sure. So if you accidentally put something in that bin and they get a letter or they get a bin tag, most of the time that does it. In fact, I think it's 85% of times that will be enough to stop that from happening ever again. So it's only a small portion of the time that gets to the next stage where it requires people in the eco team, myself, James, and the 4 others that we've got in our team, that would actually visit them. And then for the communal bins for flats, we're doing multiple stuff throughout the year where we knock on people's doors, we educate them, we make sure that the bins are being used correctly. We'll provide leaflets throughout the year. We give out annual calendars to these properties as well. So we take contamination very, very seriously, and it's something that we really, really want to help people to address at home.
Okay, thank you. We've had a couple of questions around specific materials, Oliver. A particular question around small electrical goods. Do you want to describe what Brent does in that regard and some of the considerations around the recycling of small items?
Yep, sure. So small electricals, tricky to recycle at the curbside. We don't accept them at curbside, unfortunately. So what you can do instead is we've got the Abbey Road Household Waste Recycling Centre, or rather Reuse and Recycling Centre. You can book your time slot in there and take them down to there to be recycled fully. Alternatively, you can book a large item collection or special item collection, and we will come to pick it up as well. And you can book up to 5 items in one collection. So if you do have, say, a TV or something like that, so you can pop it on that, and then you'll have 4 more spaces to fill that up with in that collection that you book. If the item is reusable or in good condition, then also please consider donating it to a charity shop. As we said earlier, reuse is higher than recycling, so we really want to get those items working where we can. And if it's something that you really like and you enjoy having, then please consider trying to repair it as well. A lot more repair shops are available now than they have been before. And I believe I just glanced at the chat a moment ago and someone referenced repair shops and repair cafes. And you're absolutely spot on. Western and Waste Authority does run a number of repair cafes, or have done in the past. So please check out their websites if they're running any more events, because they often can help you there. There is an organization, the name of which escapes me now, that specialize in electrical repairs as well. I've worked with in the past, so I'll dig up that name and I'll circulate it with people. But yeah, that's just some of the things that you can do with your electricals.
Can I?
Okay.
Could I just add something onto the back of that there, please? There are local drop-off points as well that will be around you. If you look on the Recycle Now website, which is a really great website for information as well, there you can put in your postcode and they'll show you some local recycling drop-off points. I've seen in the comments here some people saying that Abbey Road is not accessible without cars, which is completely understandable. So if you look there, you will see electrical drop-off points which are near you, and there will be locations that are closer to you than Abbey Road may well be. And recently we've trialed some localized electronics and textiles collections in the borough. So for certain roads and certain areas, certain estates, where we've gone and organized an electrical and a textiles collection and made it as easy as possible for residents to recycle their textiles and their electricals through us. This was just a trial that we've put in place, and we're looking at the results at the moment, and we're going to see if this is something that we can continue to do in the coming months and in the coming years. But have a look at recyclenow.com and it will tell you local shop or place that you can recycle your electricals that might be closer than Abbey Road.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got just a couple of minutes left, so 2 or 3 more questions. There's a couple around food waste and an interest in food waste. One of the questions that's been put into the chat is what is Brent Council, what is Veolia doing to encourage more of our businesses, particularly those food businesses in the borough, to recycle more of their food waste? Can you give us some insight into that, Oliver and James?
Businesses, well, I can't really speak much on behalf of businesses. I know that we do, Veolia and Wembley do operate quite a very strong commercial waste part of the business as well, and so we do offer that to businesses if they do require it. So we will, as refuse and recycling, we will actually recycle their food waste as well. and that'll be collected separately and sent to a different processing facility that we send the municipal waste to. But other than that, I can't really give you much more insight into what happens specifically for businesses, because our area really just covers what what houses do. Other than that, I'm afraid.
Okay, so one for the council there to work on perhaps over the coming years is to devise a system that will collect food waste from our businesses and recycle that in a useful way as well. So a gap in our system there, if you like. One question that has been asked is around the value of home composting over putting food waste in the caddies and allowing that to be collected by yourselves on a weekly basis. Can you maybe just describe in the move towards net zero what that value is in terms of doing it yourself, composting in the back garden?
Go on, James.
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of elements that come into play here. I think, if we look back on the presentation we just did and look back at the waste hierarchy, the first thing to do is to reduce. And so naturally, if we are to collect your recycling from your property, we would need the vehicle to come out there, the vehicle to take it back, and then vehicles to take them around, and to process at such a large scale will be relatively energy intensive and carbon intensive. Whereas if there's no emissions to do with transport to go from your kitchen into your food caddy, into your garden compost bin, that's going to cut out a huge amount of emissions there. And further than that, to do anything on an industrial scale requires a lot more energy and is a lot more carbon intensive than to do anything at home and do it on your own. So the energy required as well in home compost bins is usually zero. They're really fantastic. You just turn them every so often. It doesn't need anything to power them. They're naturally occurring. They'll create the heat themselves through the food and garden waste that you have in there, or whatever you might have to break down the food and garden waste into the compost or into the fertilizer. And so therefore it's almost an energy-free process compared to the amount of energy that's required to collect it from each of our properties and send it and then to be processed on an industrial scale. So if we can see there the difference, it's from relatively energy intensive, despite the fact that it does produce energies with what we do when we collect it from you, to go and be completely energy free and to not require anything is always going to be the best solution. So that's reducing our energy consumption there.
And just to add to that, home compost bins are actually, you can order them online, not via the Brent website, but if you do have a look and search for them on the Brent website, you'll see that there's a subsidy, and that can help you to purchase one for a little bit cheaper. So do search home composting on the Brent website if you're interested in buying your own.
Okay, good stuff. Just very quickly, a couple of last questions. One that I can answer. There's a suggestion in the chat that maybe some of the recycling waste that we collect alongside the general refuse on a weekly basis ends up in the back of the dust cart and gets mixed in an unhelpful way. I can answer that. That's just a perception, I'm afraid. What we do have in our dust carts is separate compartments, one for recyclable material and one for the general refuse. So all of that waste does end up in the back of the vehicle at the same time, but it does go into separate compartments. And finally, Oliver and James, one question around Tetra Paks and fruit juice cartons. A very simple question: which bin, grey or blue?
Blue bin.
Blue recycling bin. Any Tetra Paks, you can see on the side it will say Tetra Pak, but yeah, orange juice cartons, anything like that.
Yeah, we're one of the good places in the country that can do that at the curbside. So rest assured, pop them in your blue bin.
Excellent, good stuff. A positive note to end on there, and that's us really. We've come to the end of the session. We've been an hour and a half. It's now just gone 7:30, so we're at the end. I hope that does give you all a very useful and helpful insight into the work that we're doing here in Brent to manage waste more sustainably. I hope it does give you some insight into how managing waste more sustainably can help us drive towards our ambition of a carbon neutral position by 2030 as well. So it's important stuff really. And I'd just like to finish off really by thanking you for your participation tonight, for showing an interest in what we're doing here in Brent. And I'd just like to thank you and hope that you have a very enjoyable rest of your evening. Thank you everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.